Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, we're going to be building this. This is a DIY NFT shelved system with Spider Farmer SF600 grow lights in a compact DIY design that you can build yourself at home. Okay, so the inspiration for this system comes from the cotton ball propagation technique that I explored with you in the cotton ball propagation video. I was really impressed with the efficacy of this technique. It is a really cheap way of bringing seeds through to the stage where they present their first true leaves and are able to be placed within a hydroponic system. And I'll show you why I really like this technique. So here I have a tray of the lettuce that I've started in cotton wool balls. As you can see, we can fit a lot of seedlings into one area, and that density allows us to be way more efficient when it comes to the propagation of our seedlings. As well as this, you can see that the amount of grow media we have to work with is really small. And this is beneficial to us because in the system that we're going to be designing, we are going to be utilizing smaller pipes to make the system more compact. And the size of the grow media is going to allow us to fit more plants into a smaller area. Okay, so out here we have an example of the cotton balls in action. These have all been placed out into my NFT, and I want to show you how even the larger plants like this lettuce have really only got a very small amount of roots. So you can see there that the cotton ball has been completely taken over by the roots of, there's actually 4 separate lettuce in this one large bunch. But if I grab one that has a single lettuce, like this seedling, you can see that there's really not that many roots that go into creating one head of lettuce. And the cotton wool technique marries up really well with the nutrient film technique, because you can see there that because there is not much grow media, the plant is encouraged to utilize the base of our nutrient film technique, and that allows the plant to take full advantage of the technique and the nutrient film providing oxygen to the plants. These are some of the healthiest lettuce that I've ever grown, and it's been extremely hot. It's the middle of summer where I am. And I put this down to the roots actually being spread across the surface of the water and the water being cooler. The evaporative cooling over the water surface, cooling the water down and providing a really nice root temperature for these plants. So it's this small root size that this propagation media allows that I'm going to take advantage of in the system that I'm designing today. Okay, so the things I'll be utilizing today are all of these pipe fittings. Now they're all 40mm DWV, I believe, pipe fittings. Also, I'll be using a large reservoir. Mine's 100 liters, and I'm just reusing it from a build that I had previously used it for, which was the round pipe vertical hydroponic system. And I'll be using a shelving unit that I already had, just over $40 at my local hardware store. And I'll also be using these. These are the cheap Kegland pumps that I've been using for all the systems I've been building lately, and they are remarkably inexpensive. So I'll leave a link in the description for these pumps as well if you're after a cheap alternative to the pumps available probably within your local hardware store. You'll also need some 4mm poly pipe, a 6-port manifold so that we can split our pump into 4mm poly pipe, and some plumber's tape. As well as this, I'll be using some cable ties and these. These are the Spider Farmer SF600 full spectrum grow light. Now they are a 60-watt grow light fixture. I've used them in the past. I've used them for propagating seedlings, but I've actually found that these lights are fantastic for taking plants all the way to full term as well. So we're going to be using 3 or 4 of these for the build, and these are going to sit right above our lettuce on our NFT shelving system. So let's get to building the system. Okay, so here I have the shelving that I'll be using, and I'm just going to adjust these shelves to the height that I want this system to work at. So I'm just going to remove all of the internal parts because we're not going to be using these parts. So for these lights, I want to have a hanging height of about 1 foot. So I'm just going to measure where I'll be hanging the lights from, which is the side crossbars here, and then I'm going to add on a little bit extra. So I'm going to go 1 foot and probably another 2 inches, just so that I have some up and down wiggle room that I can move the lights up and down within. And because we're going to have the pipes sloping, we're going to make sure that one of each bar is offset. One side is always going to be 1 peg lower than the other. And as you can see here, this side, all of my shelf spacing is 1 notch higher than the rest. And this will allow our NFT to drain down with gravity that away. So I just realized we won't even need to drill out the holes, because the way that these lights hang with a wire that runs up and over and then back through a little screw. So we'll be able to loop it over and attach the light like so. So these are the hangers, and they're just a wire with a little nut that slides along that you do up with a butterfly nut. They just screw to top of the SF600s, and then with that we can just loop this over the top and back through the butterfly nut, and you just pull it taut, and that will allow us to lift up our light, and our light's hung. Okay, so I hope you can see that, how I've looped it up and over and just tightened it from each end. When you hang these lights, just make sure that the slope of the light, which is going to be equal to the slope of the channel because it's hanging from the same rests that the channel will be rested on. Make sure that the power end is at the high end of the light, so that if there are any drips, it runs down and off the light on the non-power end where there's no connection. I'm just going to measure the length that I want for the runs. The runs of the NFT are going to be exactly the same as the SF600, and that probably means that it's 1 meter long. So I'm doing 1 meter long NFT runs. I'm doing 2 of them per each level, 6. So I'm going to measure and cut those out of my pipes. And I know this is probably obvious, but these are 3 meter lengths, which makes that the perfect amount for 2 pipes. And then I've got an extra pipe left over for all the fiddly bits at the end. So I've had a bit of a think about this, and I was going to have each run through a big T or a little T piece, but it would actually mean that the runs were too far apart. So what I'm actually going to do is, rather than feeding them through a single return, I'm actually going to have them returning through dual returns, just going straight down into the reservoir. This will decrease the likelihood of a clog with roots. However, I doubt that will happen with the size of these pipes. And then on the way down, I'll just have big T's joining up the runs as the water falls. And these will just empty straight down and into my reservoir, which will be housed below this shelving unit. Now, I actually kind of wish I got a taller shelving unit, because this is going to be a very interesting setup for the res below, but we will see how we go. So now I'm going to drill out the holes in these runs, because I want to see what my plant spacing looks like. So for that, we're actually going to go outside and measure the size of the lettuce that we're putting into it. So this lettuce is actually spaced out a bit wider than I would like, and I don't really mind the leaves touching or intermingling. Rather than the spacing here of 20, oh, that's pretty good, I'm going to go spacing of 15 along the pipe, and that will give us a nice dense lettuce, because it's only a small amount of area and I want to get the most out of the 6 meters of pipe that I've got. So I'm just going to go along and mark on my pipes 150 millimeters or 15 centimeters. And now I'm just going to drill them out, starting forwards, center, and then finish in reverse. The hole saw I'm using is a 29 millimeter or 1 1/8 inch. And there you have a small NFT run. I'm going to do that for all the rest. So I've now got all of my holes drilled for my NFT rails. I'm going to lay them out on the system and we can have a look at running all the pipe down to where our res will be underneath the structure. And I'm going to add on our end caps, and we can look at tying them down with our zip ties. Now, I didn't want to 3D print any parts for this build because I wanted anyone to be able to make it, but you can obviously just 3D print end caps for these if you like. All of the fittings would be easily replicated in a 3D program as well. So these ends will have T-pieces, and the top ends are going to have our elbows, which will go on like so. And now I'm going to measure and cut the pipe that's going to drop down between the runs. That's perfect. So even though these are actually quite secure where they are, I am going to zip tie them in place. And the way that I'm going to do that is by using 2 large zip ties and just running them around the pipe like so, and connecting them like this, and then back under and meeting the other half of the zip tie like so. And that's just going to give us a nice clean attachment that's going to hold our NFT in place. And I'm going to go along and do that for all of our pipes. Okay, so here comes the part that I hadn't really planned ahead for. I didn't know how I was going to hold this system over the top of this reservoir, but now I think I've figured it out. We'll place this whole setup like so. It actually does fit like just above, but I'm not going to risk the way that that is precariously positioned. Okay, so I think I figured it out. If I have a piece of timber attached to this side that is the width of the legs, I can drill in from the legs and that will secure it to the base. And if I have 2 pieces of timber coming down from the legs on this side, they can act as the feet. So I'm just going to cut myself some small bits of timber to enable this. Obviously, the way around this is to get a taller shelving unit, which is very much an option. I'm just using the one that I have available to me. And there's our timber. And that is just going to slide in like so, like so, like so. And for this side, we can attach our piece of wood just by running some screws up underneath. And that's attached half our lid, which is already pre-cut from the last system I had. So pre-cut that first, and then you'll actually have a removable section of lid for your res. This makes this whole system one solid piece, especially once I'm going to drive some screws into the legs on the other side. This will just slide over like so, and I can just throw some screws into that to make it a solid piece. And I'll tell you what, that's pretty sturdy. Look at that. I'm pretty happy with that actually. I'm very happy with that. Okay, so I'm now going to cut some pieces for that end so I can run the pipe on an elbow and then down into the res. And I'm also going to cut a piece out of my removable lid so that I can run my pump, which is going to be attached to 15mm PVC pipe and BSP fittings at each end, which allows me to screw it into the pump as well as into a 6-port manifold, which I'm going to have feeding each one of the ends of the NFT rails. So I'm going to cut a hole out of my lid, and the way that our pump is going to fit into the reservoir is it's just going to sit at the bottom like so, and our 15mm pipe is just going to slot into our BSB to 15mm, which is attached to the pump, and our piece is just going to fit over the top like that. So this is where it's going to live. I'm going to move it into place, and then we can plumb it up with our 6-port manifold and our 4mm tubing going into each of our channels. So the 6-port manifold is just going to go onto our BSB to 15mm pipe adapter at the end after we tape it up. The way that this works is this will screw over the top, and then it will split our flow into 6 separate 4mm hoses which are adjustable by this screw on the top. We can adjust them up and down, opening them right up or closing them right off. Now I'm gonna have them as open as possible, and we can just screw that onto our pipe like this. Now I'm actually going to lower this down, so I'm going to cut a bit off this just so that I can fit it in. And I'm also going to drill holes in the end of all of my pipes so that I can fit my 4mm tubing through and into them. And now I can connect up my tubing to my manifold and measure out how much I need. And that's what it looks like. 6 lines going into 6 individual NFT rails, which are all individually flow adjusted, so you can turn them up and down. All right, now I'm gonna add in the rest of the lights. Oh, you know what I haven't considered? This pipe is going straight through where that light will be. Bugger. I'm gonna have to take that manifold all the way down to the bottom and run the 4mm all the way up. All right, that's actually not too bad, just annoying. I'm actually gonna cut this pipe here, put the manifold down here, have the black line running up, and it'll actually make it look neater anyway. Okay, and as you can see, we end up with all our 4mm piping terminating at our manifold and then running all the way up to all of our NFT ends. Now I can add in my lights and then we can fill it up and test the pump and have a look at how the system turns over. So I'm actually going to have all the power zip tied to the top and running along and down to the lights. And all of the lights are actually sloped away from where the power enters the light, because I want any water that drips or overflows to run down and drip away from the power end of the lights, and have all of the bricks and stuff above the water so that if any drips do occur, they only fall down and away from the power. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'll zip tie all of the power bricks that control the lights to the top rail and then run them from a power point which is above the system. Okay, so I'm now going to fill up the res and we can check how the system runs. Now, while it's filling up, I just want to discuss the design of the system in the sense that I actually do think that you should, if you can at all possible, get a larger shelving unit, purely for the fact that I would prefer to be able to drag the reservoir out and clean it rather than have it connected to the system. That's my mistake. I should have built it differently, but I do actually like this design. It's just gonna make it a little bit of a hassle to empty and clean, but I'll just pump out the water when I'm done with the nutrient and then add new nutrient. And then once every year or so, I can get in there with a wipe and wipe it out. So you can see the float valve down there. If you did want to have this topping up from another bigger reservoir, you could. You just have to have the res elevated above it, and you could have this topping up either fresh water so that when the system turns over, it just dilutes with time, or you could have it topping up with half strength nutrient, as is the nutrient I'll be using in this system, because it is a leafy green system. You will not be able to use this system for anything that has any amount of roots, so we're pretty much limited to a lettuce system here. So that's filled up above the pump. I'm actually going to turn it on and see how we go for flow. So I'll plug my pump in at the wall, and the pump will always be on, so there's no timer. And you can see in the channels the flow rate along there. So we've got actually a really nice strong flow rate, and that's in all of the channels, even at the top there. So you can see the flow coming through the bottom of the channels. That is working rather nicely. I'm really happy with that actually. Here is a par sensor right where the lettuce will be. 504 par. Now that's actually a really nice par for lettuce. And over at the side, we're looking at about 400. So I'm going to throw some lettuce in this system and we'll see how they progress. So just to sate my own interest, I placed out some lettuce from my NFT outside into this system so that I could get an idea of the root size and how they sit within the channels. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think this system's going to perform spectacularly. Make sure you're subscribed for when I release the time lapse of this system, where I will take seeds from the cotton ball technique all the way through to a harvestable, mature size lettuce within this DIY multi-story indoor NFT hydroponic system. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos. Happy hydroponicking, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos.